The information system described in this presentation has been developed to collect all the information produced during the Saint-Luc project. The Saint-Luc project aims to study through a multidisciplinary approach the religious murals created by Gino Severini during his collaboration with the Group de Saint-Luc in the Roman part of Switzerland between 1920s and 1940s. The research involves many different professionals and includes the study of the executive techniques and the material used by the artist to make the wall paintings decorating the churches of Saint Nicolas in Semsal, of Notre-Dame de l'Assomption in La Roche, of Notre-Dame du Valentin in Lausanne, of Saint-Pierre in Fribourg, and the Couvent des Capucins in Sion. Organizing the documentation in such a project is a complex activity itself. The data produced is vast and varied. We have a huge amount of historical documents from the archival research, photographic documentation, 3D models, orthographic images, and the graphic documentation with dozens of layers describing the materials, the execution techniques, the state of conservation, and the signs of previous interventions. Finally, we have scientific investigation like the multispectral imaging, the observation with portable microscope, non-invasive investigation like X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, infrared spectroscopy, and lab analysis carried out on collected samples. All this documentation is produced by a team of professionals with different backgrounds from different institutions and countries. In similar projects, the data entry is often delegated to someone else who is not always familiar with all the contents. That's why our challenge was to allow team members to upload their contents on their own while the project is still ongoing. The information system was designed to identify the heritage both in its geometry and through its description, track all the activities carried out on the heritage, organize, archive and make accessible the documentation produced as part of the project. The first goal of the system is to be used as an exchange platform by team members, because the uploaded information is immediately available for researchers for integration and comparison. In the long term, all the data collected will represent an important resource for those who will work again on the same heritage for conservation, research and maintenance activities. The database will constitute a medical record useful for those responsible for the management, protection and maintenance of the property. Finally, the system will be used for dissemination, making the resources accessible to anyone. Many people, when they hear of databases, think of a list of files. The relational model we have developed is actually quite complex. The public database schema alone contains more than 90 tables, 2,500 fields and 450 constraints. The structure of the DB, which is roughly summarized in this graph, was built keeping in mind the work carried out in Italy on national scale information systems for the protection of heritage and risk assessment. Our intention was to develop a model that is flexible enough to cover any situation, scalable and expandable. The database collects information about the institutions involved in the process. Institutions can be universities, public agencies, research institutes, and any other subject working on heritage. One or more institutions can cooperate in one or more projects with different roles. A project is the framework under which several activities are carried out. The Saint-Luc project itself is the first project adopting this system, and we hope there will be more in the future. Many types of activities can be carried out as part of a project, and may include historical and archival research, visual examination, scientific investigation, restoration interventions, monitoring, maintenance, and much more. A single activity can involve one or more cultural properties. For each activity, we complete a datasheet with information about its goals, the expected results, the methodology followed, and a description of the obtained results. Critical issues are recorded as well in order to improve the methodology in the future. In general, any note that could be useful in the long term for the management is entered in the activity record. We are now filling such records to describe ongoing activities, but we could use the system to schedule activities in the future, thus defining a management plan. Just as for the institutions, there is a table with the profiles of subjects involved in the activities. We have called them players, and they are those subjects who directly carry out activities on cultural heritage. The players can be individuals or companies. One or more players can be linked with one or more activities with different roles. On the other side of the graph, we see tables designed to describe heritage. This part of the DB constitutes a catalog of cultural heritage that will expand with the launch of new projects and the continuation of the works. The system has a cataloging function through datasheets describing entities, which are any kind of physical objects. An entity can be an artifact, for example a wall painting or a movable artifact, or can be a building, for example a church or a museum. Completing the datasheet of the entities represents the starting point of the data entry, as any information collected as part of the project is linked to entities. Entities can have child entities. Every entity can have one and only one parent entity. As an example, we can have a record describing the Church of St. Nicholas, which is an heritage itself, and a record describing each mural in the church. There are no limits to the number of sub-entities that can be created and nested one in the other recursively, as folders and subfolders. If an entity is linked with another information, then child entities inherit all the links from the parent as indirect links. These indirect links have a specific level of relationship, for example level 1 from the parent and level 2 from the grandparent, and so on. The opposite is also true. A parent entity will acquire the child's link with a certain level of relationship. For example, if a document, such as an historical picture of a painting, concerns a specific wall painting in a chapel, then it will also be found when querying the database about the chapel or the church as a whole. It is possible to modify the hierarchical structure at any time, and the corresponding links will be updated in real time. The authors are uniquely identified through a datasheet that shows their personal data. Authors can be subsequently related to one or more entities, specifying the role played by the author in the creation of that entity, because more authors can work together in the creation of an entity. In the same way, we can link the authors to historical documents. As for authors, we can identify any publication and subsequently link it to entities and files. In those links, we will specify the page numbers and images that actually reference the entity within the publication. A summary of the bibliography appears in the referenced sheet and is updated in real time if the publication record is changed. This behavior is similar for the linked authors. Links between sheets can also be used to quickly browse entities and files, for example by selecting all files in which an author had a role. Cartography plays a very important role in the system. The system is in fact a geographic information system. There are two levels of cartography. The first consists of a territorial cartography that allows to locate all the entities. This is very useful for the safeguard and protection related applications. The interesting thing is that if an entity doesn't have its own geometry, it inherits the position from the parent entity. This is very useful in the management of movable property. In addition to territorial cartography, there is a second level that we could define as an entity-related cartography. This cartography allows to fully describe the surface of an entity. It's a bit like when we go from Google Maps to Street View. When several types of files are specific to a point or an area, spots are created. The spots are subsets of an entity's surface. The spots are represented on the cartography. They have a datasheet describing the spot itself and a summary of the information available. Spots allow linking to the file. Typical files are data from point analysis and sampling areas. In the case of sampling, which in turn will be producing much more data from lab analysis, there is an additional specific sample datasheet. Sections obtained from samples have a datasheet as well, with the archival location, the archive and the place, to make them accessible in the future to other researchers. All data created or collected within an activity of the project are acquired as a file and are briefly described in a datasheet. File can be any type of content, such as archival sources, audio documentation, video documentation, metric survey and graphic documentation, photographic documentation, any type of report, and scientific analysis. Files always belong to an activity, and through it they are linked to players. So, when querying the database, we always know who created or collected them, for what purpose and in what context. A file can be linked with authors and bibliography, and also with one or more cartographic objects such as entities, spots, and samples. In these cases, it will be accessible directly from a map. The system is designed to create thematic layer with any geometric type and any reference system, and is based on the Qgis standard. An administrative interface allows the creation of new layers. New spatial tables are added automatically when needed. Each project stores its geometric data in separate tables. The geometries can be used for thematic mapping or to define the shape of physical objects, as in the case of the entities. In other cases, such as for spot and photographic documentation, the geometries are used as placeholders for linking further information. The system has a client-server architecture based on the open-source DBMS Postgres. The database manages both alphanumeric and spatial data through the PostGIS spatial extension. Any information is stored in the database except for attached files, which are stored in a cloud service. Client-side, we have two desktop applications used by team members and a web application for external users. The project is still ongoing and this part is still incomplete. The first desktop application is based on Microsoft Access. This client application is designed to be used by team members and allows full read-write access to all tables, depending on the user's privileges. Privileges can be granted to individual users or to groups they can join. Privileges are not managed by the application, but by the DBMS itself. Security management is implemented on the server side. It is possible to grant different privileges for each single record of the same table. Privileges granted on a parent record are inherited for child records. As an example, someone who is authorized to modify an entity will be able to modify anything that derives from it. Privileges can be granted on any node of the hierarchical structure, thus making it possible to let someone work safely only on specific areas. The application has a sophisticated search interface that allows you to search for records based on any field. For the text fields, it is possible to use different string comparison operators. Fuzzy search allows, for example, to search among keywords even if they are not written exactly the same way. Query results can be added, subtracted, or intersected with the current selection. This makes the job easier. Each user can save their selection in a personal area. When searching for files, it is possible to automatically extract selected files from the archive. The files are copied to the user working folder and organized automatically in folders and subfolders based on the data sheet's contents. When querying the database, each user can define his own styles for the creation of folders and the file naming. It is not necessary to think about this in advance. The second application is based on Qgis, an open-source GIS client. This application is used by team members and provides read and write access to spatial tables based on user privileges. This cartographic application is used to browse thematic maps and orthographic images. Furthermore, the application allows to access alphanumeric data when geometry have associated records in the database. Typical examples are entities and spots, for which the corresponding data is shown. When these objects are associated with multimedia contents, it is possible to access the files directly from the map. In general, any kind of information that is linked directly or indirectly with the geometry is accessible through the map. The applications we have seen are used by team members and can access data directly only through a secure shell. A web application instead will allow anyone to query the database and access the documentation. An early prototype of this application is already online. The project is ongoing and we are now working to develop a complete and easy-to-use WebGIS interface. The final objective is to provide open access to the data and the results produced by our project to anyone interested in this subject so that future research can start from where we left it.